Today on CityCast Seattle, what's top of mind for many community members lately is ICE. Earlier this week, several schools were locked down after unconfirmed community reports of ICE agents in the area. And at a Wednesday night school board meeting, parents and teachers shared how stressful that experience was. Many Seattleites are demanding our local and state officials do more to ensure the safety of community members, and in particular, to ensure that ICE does not have access to local or state data to make arrests. Earlier this month, the UW Center for Human Rights released a report that found at least 7 cases in which Washington license plate information was used to carry out immigration enforcement. So here to discuss that is the UW Center for Human Rights Director, Angelina Godoy. Thanks so much for joining us today, Angelina.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Marcus Harrison Green, founder of the South Seattle Emerald and Hinton Publishing, and a columnist with The Stranger. Thanks so much for being here, Marcus.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jane.
Okay, so let's get into it. There's some technical details I feel like we should go over for folks. So, Angelina, I know that in this report, you all uncovered the fact that Washington's drivers' data is being shared through a platform called NLETS. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
So how is that information being accessed? And also, how is it being used for immigration enforcement functionally?
Yeah, great question. So NLETS is this national platform for data sharing. It's over 50 years old. This is not new technology. And it's basically to permit and facilitate data sharing by law enforcement across state lines. So there's law enforcement in each state that is in charge of being kind of the local, it works like a switchboard. So the local switchboard operator in Washington state is the Washington State Patrol, and they have a platform which is called Access, which is the switchboard through which these things get these queries are made of data. And so the purpose of NLETS is, let's say there's a car, in Washington that has, Idaho plates and it's parked on the side of the road, and the law enforcement comes along and says, oh, well, this is a stolen vehicle. Maybe, they want to check that, which makes sense. But what we discovered through our research is that ICE and Border Patrol are tapping into Washington State Department of Licensing information and using that to carry out immigration arrests, including civil immigration arrests.
So how does that work? Like, what are they actually doing to pull that information and try and make an arrest?
Yeah. So what they're doing, and we know this through multiple sources, not only the data that we gathered through public records requests showing the actual queries, but also sworn court testimony of ICE and Border Patrol agents in federal court, their own statements, other research, et cetera. What they're doing is literally driving to areas which they term high target-rich areas. I'll leave it up to your listeners to interpret what might constitute a target-rich area. But they're going to those areas and then scanning license plates at random. This is what they have said under oath in court. So they're scanning license plates, and what that means is not like a high-tech scan. It means they're just literally punching in the license plate numbers using the access system, which is created by Washington State Patrol to permit access to the NLETS national system, which then taps into Department of Licensing records, and then they can gather information about the registered owner of that vehicle. So that information includes the name of the registered owner, their address, their photo, and other information about them. Once they know who's the registered owner of the vehicle, that's the critical link. That's what they want to know. So they can use that name and then scan it across, run it through their own databases or other sources of information, determine if that's a person that they want to target as quote unquote deportable. And then they can arrest that person right then and there. And so that's typically what we're seeing in the cases that we've been able to document, which as of today, which is January 22nd, are now up to 16 cases. We expect another set of cases to come to us tomorrow as we're receiving these weekly installments of data. What we're seeing is that they're scanning the plates and then typically arresting the person oftentimes just minutes after scanning the plates. So they're going to areas where they think they're going to find folks that may be deportable. And I want to use that word in quotes because as we know, they're arresting people who are here perfectly lawfully, but for their interpretation. That's how they're finding people, and that's how they're accessing Department of Licensing data to permit that vital link in the chain. In other words, I see the vehicle, who's driving it, and then I get that person's photo, confirm that's the guy I'm looking for, and I'm going to pull him over right now.
There's some interpretation happening on one end of this for sure. Marcus, I'm curious what you're seeing on the ground. Like, what effect is this having on community members? Are folks, trying to avoid being out and about? Like,
Hmm.
what is the functional result of these searches happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fear and paranoia, and you can argue that that is like what is what's intended through this. I think just as you pointed to earlier this week, you had 6 Seattle public schools, I want to say, shelter in place out of, as they said, an abundance of caution. At reports of ICE sightings, and I think you continue to have. I can't tell you how many parents, just even in my own neighborhood, if they see an unmarked vehicle, or if they see yeah, one, they actually saw something that said IC and not ICE, in terms of it's marked on, and they were hiding. They told me how much they were hiding in their basement, right? So it's unfortunate that you sort of just have this constant state of sort of fear and anxiety and panic, and this shouldn't exist anywhere, let alone in quote unquote the freest nation in the world.
Angelina, who are some of the people in the cases that UW has uncovered?
Well, we're obtaining data from a variety of sources. So some of the data are people that, are represented by local attorneys who have shared their documentation with us. Others are the cases that I think a lot of us are seeing on the road, where there's just an abandoned vehicle and people say, we saw that somebody dragged some guy out of this car. We don't know who he is. And so there's multiple, levels of detail we have about these people. But sadly, I think to follow up on Marcus's point, a lot of times I think when people say, "Oh, this is just rumors, people are getting out of control," they can blame the people who are afraid, as if that fear
Right.
is unreasonable, but it's not. And in fact, one of the cases, just one, I'll give you a story, was a person who was not only pulled over directly, minutes after his data was obtained by ICE from the Washington Department of Licensing. Minutes later, they pull him over, and then they start beating him up. So he was pistol whipped. He was tased 4 times on the side of the road, and then he was sprayed at very short distance with chemical agents directly into his eyes, and then taken to detention. So this was a person who, was brutally beaten as part of a civil immigration arrest. He had no criminal record whatsoever, was not resisting arrest, and there were bystanders who witnessed it, who were not connected to him in any way, who said this is clearly an incident of excessive violence. That was permitted by the accessing of his data. It was also, of course, permitted by the fact that ICE and CBP are operating as essentially lawless forces. But they wouldn't have pulled him over if they didn't know his name, and they found that out from the Department of Licensing data about him.
Yeah, Angelina, I was going to ask, like, what is the constitutionality of this, right? I mean, we saw earlier this week a whistleblower at ICE over in Minneapolis revealed that ICE agents could, enter into folks' homes without any type of judicial warrant. What, in this case, you're describing, people being, violently beaten up and so forth. Like, what can you comment at all on the constitutionality of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's numerous legal challenges proceeding in different venues around the country, and I certainly hope that we'll secure rulings that show that these kind of practices are deeply unconstitutional. But there are some courts that have already ruled, for example, on the practice of warrantless arrest, which was the case I just mentioned to you. There was no warrant for that man's arrest.
Right.
But those cases move slowly, and a lot of times the particular individual I'm speaking about has already been deported. So it's not something we can afford to wait for the courts to rule in on. We have to take immediate measures to keep one another safe.
So
Yeah.
the state claims it does not provide info to federal agents for immigration enforcement. Does this all run afoul of state law and policy? I know in the report you get into how there's this years-long history of this happening, and I'm curious if you can say a little bit about how things have evolved over the years.
Yeah. So the state claims in general terms that it doesn't provide information to assist in civil immigration enforcement. And a key distinction there is between civil and criminal.
I see.
Because some immigration related behaviors have been criminalized, and the state is not bound by state law it's not barred from collaborating in those cases. But in civil cases, it is. And of the 9 cases that we documented in our published report, 7 are civil cases that we're able to see in the person's legal documents. It was purely a civil arrest. And so in those kinds of cases, state law says that state agencies, including the Department of Licensing, should not be collaborating in the investigation in any way or in carrying out the arrest. We're not arguing they helped carry out the arrest, but it's very clear that the arresting agents tapped into the Department of Licensing database and used the information they obtained there in order to conclude this was a person that they wanted to arrest. So I think in terms of what the state claims now, you have to ask them, but they have not denied that the evidence we've brought forward is accurate. And in fact, that people's data has been given to the feds in this way. What they have said is, well, we don't know when the feds make a request of our data through this system. It's not like a person monitoring the request. It's an automated system. So the data is given typically within seconds of a query coming in. And they say, well, we don't know if it's for a civil case or a criminal case. And that's why they claim we are not collaborating in civil immigration enforcement because we're unaware whether a given query is going to be used for civil or criminal purposes. What I would say is that's not enough.
Right. Yeah, I know that in a statement replying to a draft of the report, the Department of Licensing and Washington State Patrol said that the claim that they're ignoring state law is, quote, imprecise and, quote, misleading and inflammatory. Yes. They also said that ICE has not used NLETS since its access was cut off on November 19th of last year. You just mentioned, the center has been querying weekly to see what is going on. Have you all found any evidence that NLETS has continued to be used past that November 19th date that the DOL and WSP say?
Yes, we have. But it doesn't mean on this particular point, I want to be careful that the state is lying because, in fact, all the evidence we are seeing suggests that the state was actually accurate in saying they cut off data access for ICE ERO, which is part of ICE. There's also ICE HSI, and they do not claim to have cut off access for HSI, nor do they.
What do ERO and HSI stand for?
Yes, thank you for asking. So ERO is enforcement and removal operations. That's part of ICE. HSI is Homeland Security Investigations. Sometimes people mistakenly think that's a different agency, but it's actually part of ICE. So the state says we cut off ICE access. What they really mean and what the data shows, we're continuing to receive the data, is that they cut off access to ICE ERO. That's an important step. But of the records that we have received, for example, the 9 in our report, 8 of them were CBP accessing the data and collaborating in the arrest. Only 1 was ICE ERO. And so cutting off ICE ERO is a step forward, but it's nowhere near enough when the overwhelming majority of queries are coming from Border Patrol.
So Angelina, I mean, I hate to be blunt or I guess brusque on this, but yeah. Is this for like lay people? Would this be something similar to my sister had this boyfriend and he was like, okay, I'm no longer cheating on you with this one person, right? Yeah. But then it came back a couple of weeks later. She was like, I thought you said you weren't cheating on me. He said, no, I didn't tell you that I wasn't cheating on you in the main. I was saying I was not cheating on you with this one person. Yeah. So technically I was correct. I mean, is that sort of what this is here?
I mean, this distinction between agencies, yes. And so you'll find these very carefully parsed statements from the state saying, we've cut off access to ICE. Yes, I don't dispute that they have cut off access to ICE ERO. But again, that's not where the bulk of the queries were coming from. And in fact, what we're seeing is that ICE ERO, HSI, and CBP are operating in joint operations. And indeed, many of the cases that we documented in the report, the query to NLETS data was made by CBP and the person was arrested by ICE. So it's important to not get lost in the sauce of these acronyms and say Washington data is still vulnerable and it's not enough to try to distract us with these different acronyms.
So yeah, let's talk solutions here. What type of accountability is possible here? Like, I guess I'm curious also, like, have these concerns been raised in other states? Have other states successfully dealt with this? What needs to happen moving forward?
Yeah, they have been raised in other states. The clearest example is New York, which has cut off access to both CBP and ICE. And at the bare minimum, Washington can do what New York is doing. There's other intermediate steps they could do. They could stop sharing photos, for example. One of the types of data that they are sharing includes photos of people, which are used to identify the person at the wheel, right? I don't think cutting off photos is enough, but it would be a step towards recognizing the harm that's being caused by their active data sharing practices. I think that some states came at this later. Washington was actually a leader in allowing all people who are qualified to receive a driver's license or to register a vehicle to do so without regard to their citizenship status. Washington was the first state in the nation. And at that time, they didn't envision the kind of enforcement tactics that are being used. So that law is on the books from a very long time ago. New York, Minnesota, other states have passed that kind of legislation more recently, and therefore have, I think, thought more carefully about these safeguards. Whereas it's unfortunate that in Washington, due to past scandals where the Department of Licensing was shown to be releasing data to the feds for purposes of immigration enforcement, they sort of have gone into a defensive lockdown mode. And instead of being clear about what they're doing, how they can move forward, what solutions they're bringing forward, they're trying to, in this case, say, oh, this is misleading, or they're really trying to attack the messenger rather than honestly owning up to what they're doing.
Yeah, have we heard from the DOL or the Washington State Patrol in response to this report? I know that they were provided a draft of it. Have they been willing to come to the table and talk about solutions at all?
I haven't heard from the DOL or the Washington State Patrol, but I will say I've been contacted by the governor's office and hope to meet with them next week.
I think all of this really, for me, drives home how data so often leaves the hands of the people that we initially gave it to and just goes out into the world. We spoke with King County Council member Teresa Mosqueda a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things she suggested about making sure that data doesn't fall into the wrong hands is simply collecting less data. This was in the context of, talking about the possibility of installing more surveillance cameras in Seattle. I mean, but that doesn't particularly seem feasible here, right? Like, driver's license data is going to be collected if you want to apply for a driver's license. Right. I mean, but Angelina, you mentioned, maybe not sharing photos. I guess, are there other solutions to, make our databases less data rich in a way to protect people?
Yeah. Or do we just need to rely on public transportation and just say, forget it? All in all, in terms of
go
sign
off
up
the
for
radar completely. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I mean, that would be nice if we had adequate public transportation across our state, but we don't. So a lot of people are left out of availing themselves of public transportation. Right. In terms of collecting less data, I think that's generally speaking a really good principle for those who are concerned about surveillance. And we all should be concerned about surveillance in these days where just massive amounts of data is being collected and sold about all of us with very little control. I do think, for example, that what you were saying, Jane, is right, that with this particular kind of data, this isn't some kind of high-tech modern surveillance state system. This is going back to the origins of what license plates are, right? You put it on a car to identify who's the owner of that car, who's accountable if the car crashes, et cetera. It's hard to imagine a world where we don't have data about who's the registered owner of a vehicle, or even to imagine that is desirable. What I think we already live in a world where our state has made a commitment to not share our data with ICE and Border Patrol for civil immigration purposes. That's state law. So we're not talking about imagining some, better future. We're talking about what the state should already be doing, and they're not doing, and that's not good enough. All of the surveillance technologies that are being used, I think, without a lot of consideration for their civil rights implications, need to be reviewed. But I think we need to start with problems like this, which we already know the law prohibits this behavior, and yet our state is doing it. There's nothing more to say. It needs to stop.
Right.
Angelina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Seattle Center was developed for the World's Fair in 1962 with the Space Needle as its crown jewel. And some of those structures were meant to be more or less temporary, but 63 years later, Seattle Center is in need of a makeover. Here to discuss is Seattle Times art and culture reporter Margot von Singel, who recently wrote about this. Here to discuss is Seattle Times arts economy reporter Margot von Singel, who recently wrote about this. So, Margot, what is the state of Seattle Center right now? You and David Croman just published this piece. I mean, it's always looked kind of dated to me, but what did you all find about the infrastructure there?
Yes. So I don't think this story came as a huge surprise to people necessarily. I think one person that we spoke to, who is leading the foundation arm of Seattle Center, basically said it was kind of frozen in amber, just on kind of the looks, the vibes only. And I think a lot of people can, kind of agree with that on in certain ways, right? You have the climate pledge and KXP, and you have the shiny parts of it, and then you have pockets of the campus that feel a little bit like it is from a different era, because it actually is. But then when you start kind of combing through some public records and you start kind of looking at kind of the quote unquote the boring parts, the HVAC systems and the elevators and all those things, the systems that hold everything in place, the electrical systems, those are old and they're aging. The buildings are aging and really in dire need of upgrades. And that is actually to the point where even, the fire alarm systems are malfunctioning, and that is
right. That was the opening of the piece, right?
Yeah, and it's like and they will write this in like a report, like this is costing us more money because we have to do like emergency repairs, and we were asking like, well, what does that mean, and what does that really practically come down to? And then the fire alarm system is a really good example of that, because there's city code and there's laws around this. If you don't have a functioning fire alarm system, you have to have, actually, for public safety, kind of a fire watch in place. So because the fire alarm system wasn't fully functioning, for 2 weeks they had staff that had to like physically stand across campus to watch for fires for day and night. And if there was a fire, they had to like pull the alarm manually. And like labor is very expensive, and that's labor and overtime. So that was like more than $100,000, and then they had to fix the system. So like it's expensive because of those types of things. Like there's like a last minute repair that has to happen, because if they don't fix if they don't fix the HVAC system, there's a performance that can happen at McCaw Hall, for example, or something like that. So these things are actually kind of coming to a head right now.
So how expensive are we talking?
Well, so it's quite a kind of a big number. I think in 2024 they did an assessment of capital needs, is what it's called, and at that time the number that they got was $500 million, or over more than $500 million. I don't think it contained everything. So it's kind of what they would need to upgrade the campus, and do the necessary safety upgrades, facility upgrades, and that is just like kind of a baseline, is my understanding. But what they're proposing, which is potentially, we can get into the details of that, which is bonding or a levy or a combination of kind of tax dollars, public dollars, and private dollars. But what they're proposing is potentially $1 billion. And that would include both those kind of meat and potatoes upgrades, the kind of the boring parts, and some kind of more fun and sexy parts, which
tell us about the fun and sexy parts.
I think the most eye-catching part is, maybe the best way to start explaining this is they're not just the way that I put it in the story is it's a glow up that they're proposing, right? It's not just like, oh, we're gonna like make the campus a green campus and do like, make it carbon neutral, which is, yes, they're proposing that, but they're like trying to give it a glow up, or that's what they're pitching, because I think they know that is what voters are going to be a little bit more excited about. And I think they also know that voters can feel that kind of quote unquote frozen in amber feeling, right? Yeah. And so what the proposal is kind of, it's not fully formed yet, but where it's kind of it's what it's centering around at this time is really an overall upgrade of both, the lawns, and you see regrades, you see kind of a opening up more to the surrounding neighborhood. That includes like the waterfront. That includes making things more ADA accessible. That includes new lighting, new kind of walkways. And then really what is most eye-catching is a huge proposal to redo the armory and make it like much more open, like literally with kind of like glass walls and a kind of a glass ceiling, make it much trendier and you know, kind of, they said like Portland style food hall and a black box theater, and just make it more lively. And I think that's the whole pitch for Seattle Center. They just kind of want it to be more, you know, more of a trendy destination.
Yeah,
I would
giving
say.
Seattle
Yes.
Center a glow up. I mean, Marcus, have you been down to Seattle Center lately? Like, what would you like to see from that area? A glow up, if you could prescribe one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have not been there since the summertime, you know, for a Storm game. It just, you know, just doesn't quite have the appeal that I think it once held in my youth, and which is why, Mark, I want to ask, you know, in Seattle, we kind of always have this tension between preservation and imagination, and so I'm wondering, you know, with this potential proposed glow up, what appears to be sort of sacred, if you will, you know, that folks are looking at with the center versus, you know, things that, you know, need or should be changed. And you know, what have you gotten a sense of that in your reporting?
Yeah, I don't think there's actually that much that can change for this on the campus. Like a lot is actually landmarked and historic. So the upgrades would be, you know, some of the things you just can't upgrade, and you can't actually change physically, or you can't tear down. So for example, a thing that you would see change, you can upgrade the lawns, you can upgrade the lighting and these things. So you can't tear down a building that is historic and that is landmarked. So I don't think you'll see those kind of changes happening, if that's what you're asking. I think the changes that they're proposing is more like, you know, it'll be kind of nicer to walk from Lower Queen Anne into the campus, and you know, and the pitch that they're making, at least, is because we can have more of an infrastructure that you know, better electrical infrastructure, will have like even cooler festivals that like draw younger people, because we have a cooler armory, more, you know, it's going to be hipper and stuff like that, rather than like the campus itself changing. You know,
I'm not gonna lie, that seems like a tough sell for $1 billion. I don't know.
Right, I mean, but they are gonna upgrade the campus, but it's a lot of stuff that you can't immediately see, right? It's HVAC, it's structural upgrades, it's
The unsexy stuff
it's
that
the
no one
unsexy
wants to
stuff.
pay for.
It's elevators,
But that we need.
It's it's getting, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word. It's for earthquake. It's earthquake proofing. It's
yeah.
It's all that kind of stuff that is very necessary to make sure that these buildings don't crumble, and that these arts organizations who are dealing with literally like heating that is not working, boilers that are, you know, like all these things are legit not stop or at the end of their life cycles, and the campus is, you know, but that is not a sexy pitch. And so
well, Margot, you mentioned in the piece that Harrell's administration had kind of started in on making a plan, and his wife was on the advisory board of a group that was working on this. I mean, like you say, it's $1 billion, or it could be $1 billion. It's not that sexy a sell. I'm thinking about how a lot of the tenants that are in Seattle Center aren't exactly, you know, swimming in it. Like I'm thinking like the Vera Project, the Pacific Science Center, the Ballet, the Opera, like Children's Theater. These aren't organizations that are likely to have a lot of money to put into it. So where's this money going to come from? And is there any indication that Katie Wilson's administration is going to make moves on this or make it a priority?
Yeah, so the pitch would be, the original pitch was for a levy, so that would be, the money would come from voters in that, you know, that would be a property tax, and that's the original pitch, and it seems like they're still moving forward on that as far as we understand that, or that is at least still the pitch that, would have to be brought forward. It is unclear how much Katie Wilson will support that at this time, and that really was the crux of the story, right? It sounded like Harold was pretty bullish on it, or at least had showed some support, and it seemed then Katie Wilson got elected, and then it was like, well, what's going to happen to this plan now? So we have there are other options beyond. There are other Sorry, can I start over? Is that okay? Sorry. Could you ask the question again, and then I can just start over? Is that okay?
I mean, I think you mostly answered it. Just
okay.
What's going to happen with this, given that Wilson has taken over? Do we know? It sounds like we don't really know yet.
The answer is really brief. That we don't really know, and it's at this time it's a wait and see. But what we do know is that the people who are running this campaign or getting started to run this campaign and who are preparing this pitch are still very much committed to pitching this. And even though they may have to tweak it and may have to, whether that's scaling down or adapting it in some kind of way, it's from what we're hearing, they're still very much committed to pushing this forward. Yes.
All right. Well, voters of Seattle, get ready to, I guess, cast your vote and or open your checkbook to support this makeover of Seattle Center. I mean, we do want to see the infrastructure reinforced, but we'll see what happens in coming years. Let's leave it there for now. When we come back, we're going to talk about our weekend recs. So first question that I want to hear from both of you, Marcus and Margot, what do you want to shout out? Like, is there something that brought you joy this week, either personally, or have you heard any good news in the world that you want to highlight?
Oh, man. I want to just shout out quickly. The Oscar nominations were revealed yesterday. And Sinners, one of my favorite movies of 2025, broke the record for nominations. It was nominated for 16 nominations. That's 2 more than the previous record of 14. And a shout out to Delroy Lindo, who was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. It is his first nomination at the ripe old age of 73.
Oh my God, incredible.
And he has done some, he has had some tremendous roles through the years. So just, shout out to him and to Sinners.
Okay, I still got to go see Sinners. What about you, Margot? Anything you want to shout out?
Similarly, Oscars. I will say Chase Infinity not being nominated Best Actress takes a little bit away from me from the kind of Oscars good news in the One Battle After Another. She was kind of a highlight for me for the year. One Battle After Another was, I think, one of my favorite movies for the year. So I was really pleased to see the overall best movies list. One Battle After Another, Train Dreams, local movie,
Yes.
got 4 shout outs, and then my favorite was The Secret Agent. And I was really pleased to see that, not just in the foreign movie category, but also in the main best movie list. So that was really good. But yeah, Chase Infinity not kind of being snubbed for Best Actress was kind of my, sorry to bring it down immediately, but I just wanted to.
They got to
Rose and Thorn.
Yeah, they got to put Emma Stone in there another time, as if she doesn't have 2 Oscars already. But whatever.
God,
anyway.
No. Although I'm an Emma Stone stan, I have to say.
I like her as well. Just anyway.
I have a few local things to shout out, and if you all have thoughts, feel free to jump in. But first of all, we saw that San Juan County is doing a 32-hour work week. It is going well for them. Hell yeah, brother. Let's all work 32 hours a week. That would be amazing. It seems like they've seen an uptick in people who want to apply for those jobs as well, which does not surprise me. I want to live a little island life where I'm working 4 days a week instead of 5.
If only I didn't have to pay rent in Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That
it's called a 60-hour work week to do that. Anyway.
We've also learned this week that Orca is now soon going to allow us to tap a credit card or a phone to pay for fare instead of having to have an Orca card.
Oh,
Very
man.
exciting.
Way to catch up with 21st century.
I
Awesome.
know. I'm glad we finally got there. And in other transit news, we are going to get overnight bus service to the Seattle-Tacoma airport starting in March. Details have not yet been announced for where those stops will be. It seems like early reports are that they might be just kind of along the same general path of light rail. But hey, it'd be great to be able to take public transit to the airport instead of having to call a $1 million Lyft or Uber.
Yeah.
All right, so last question for you all. What are you doing this weekend? And is there anything you recommend people go check out? Marcus, I'm assuming your answer is going to be the Seahawks, but I don't want to speak for you too soon.
Oh my goodness, Jen, I don't like rehashing something that I recommended for last week. I love it, Jane. I love it. Okay, because I cannot stand the 49ers, as I said, and I know that the Seahawks are not facing the 49ers, they're facing the LA Rams, but I just want to put a bow on that whole thing with the 49ers. They gave them a molly whipping last week, 41-6. It was just like they treated them like an overpriced San Francisco apartment. They gave them no space. They let them know there was no future, and everyone was forced out early. It was terrible for San Francisco. And yes, I will be watching at 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, our time, the Seahawks hopefully get to the Super Bowl and beat the Rams. A quick shout out to that I heard from a reliable source that the cities have those sort of stupid bets between the mayors, with like, oh, if your team wins, I'll give you this. If your team wins, I'll give you this. Well, Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, it looks like she is going to, wager some tacos. Not an In-N-Out burger. That's the only thing I want from LA.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, and it looks like Katie Wilson, our mayor, will wager some Boon Boona coffee. So, shout out to Boon Boona. Also, immigrant-run business here in Seattle, and wonderful coffee place. If you all have not checked it out, please do so.
Love that. I mean, I feel like at this point, Marcus, you got to bring it up every week until the end, right? Like it feels like every week you've brought it up, it's gone well. Not to jinx things. All right, what about you, Margot? Anything you're doing this weekend or that you want to shout out?
I want Marcus to summarize Seahawks games for me every time because I am so unaware of what's going on. And I'm like, that's the perfect nugget. If I can ask him to send me like a little voice note, that's all I need to know.
It's all you need for the water cooler, Margot. Yes.
I'm going to go the like opposite way, which is if you do not want to know anything about sports. I was out sick for a couple weeks, so I haven't seen this exhibit, but I'm really excited about it. It is called The Panic Room. It's at the vestibule in Ballard, and it is a collective of 4 Korean artists, and they basically have created a panic room in the gallery where they've created this kind of like the story behind it, where like an imaginary artist has like been creating art in this panic room and then had to leave, and it's about this. It sounds kind of funny and whimsical, but it is kind of about the immigrant experience right now, and it's like kind of you have to kind of piece together the clues of the artworks that are like left there, and it just sounds really cool, and I think it's like really innovative, and I think people should go check it out, and I'll be checking it out a little belatedly, so yeah, people can join me.
Amazing. Awesome. I love interactive art.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my little shout out is that I'm going bowling this weekend, and I can't wait to throw gutter ball after gutter ball in honor of.
Do you have your own shoes, Jane?
No, of course I don't have my own shoes. Wait, I mean, I guess there are people who have their own bowling balls. If you're like a big bowling person, I guess drop us a line and let me know if I need more gear. But I am looking forward to putting on those little clown shoes for the first time in many, many years and making a fool of myself at West Seattle Bowl. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Margot, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And Marcus, thanks as always for being here.
Always a great time, Jay.
All right. Have a great weekend, all. And I'm going to just let you guys go, and I'm going to record my little outro. Sam, if you want to. Here to discuss is Seattle Times arts economy reporter Margot von Singel, who recently wrote about this. And all right, I'm going to do the little outro. I'm your host, Jane C. Hu. Our executive producer is Ashley Smith. Our creative producers are Sam J. Leeds and Liam Billingham. Post-production this week was done by PJ Shahamat. Our audience development manager is Ben Keenan. Music is by Aaron Taylor Waldman, All the Kimonos, and Los Mocochetes, with additional mixing by Tyler Lindgren. Our ad music is by Sven Lindvall, Five Dime Fellas, and Sarah the Instrumentalist from Epidemic Sounds via Getty Images. And listeners, thanks for joining us today. Remember that we always love hearing from you guys. Send us your news tips, your questions, your hot goss, any good news you've heard by sending an email to seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast hotline at 206-880-3931. If you're enjoying the podcast, follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. If you leave us a little review, it's really helpful too, and just tell your friends about us. We're also on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at CityCast Seattle. And if you want to watch full episodes, including video of our beautiful faces, we are also on YouTube. You can find more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. Until next week, see ya, Seattle.